So this is going to be interesting because the source is technically from Vancouver. Yeah, today what I wanted to do was talk about my second and third favorite teams in the National Hockey League, the Montreal Canadiens and the Detroit Red Wings, and a conversation that was put up about these two teams from one insider, Frank Seravalli. Because if there's anything about Seravalli we all know, is that he's got a lot to say about most NHL organizations. So, where exactly is all of this coming from? Well, what I wanted to do was refer to a radio interview, Halford and Bruff, from yesterday at 9 a.m. PST in Vancouver, Sportsnet 650, wherein Seravalli spoke out on the show about NHL news and notes. Now, you might actually recognize that we did use this same audio hit in yesterday's Mike Matheson Vancouver Canucks video, because that commentary was also based off of some comments made by Seravalli on this very radio hit. However, there is an extended conversation about Montreal that Seravalli proposed on this video broadcast that I thought was super interesting. And to help us out, we're going back over to Canucks News Summaries, who went out there and posted the transcription. This Twitter account is amazing. They seriously go out there and transcribe a lot of the interesting notes and news from radio hits, interviews, media, etc. So that if you, for example, don't have the time to listen to the radio interview itself, you can just read the Spark Notes version of it. Or if you're like me and you like to use these ideas to make videos on the internet, you can screenshot these and put it on the screen so it's easier for people to follow along. So, Frank Seravalli spoke out about a bunch of Canucks stuff, the Boston Bruins, the Blues, Jim Montgomery's firing, etc. But then he went out there and spoke about the Sens, the Sabres, and the Wings. Take a look at this. Frank Seravalli says that it's been a grind for all of these teams, and they have each tried to exit their rebuilds in different ways. The Red Wings tried to pay for big-name free agents. The Sabres acquired all young players. The Sens are a hybrid of the Sabres and the Red Wings. And none of these strategies have worked. The Red Wings are the team in the biggest struggle of these three. And Frank Seravalli says he doesn't think it'll be long before the Montreal Canadiens pass the Red Wings. They can't trade their way out of this. And so, this is the conversation that I wanted to have in this video. The funny thing is, if you look at the replies to this tweet, everybody's talking about Vancouver and Mike Matheson and Marcus Pettersson, and of course, it's understandable to see why, because it's Vancouver Canucks News Summaries. They just went out there and transcribed all the comments made by Seravalli, which happened to include some discourse about the Wings and the Canadiens. So the question is this: is Seravalli correct in his assessment that the Detroit Red Wings might eventually get passed by the Montreal Canadiens in terms of their rebuild status at some point in the next year or so? I know he didn't necessarily label out a timeline, but we're going to assume maybe a year or 2 years or 3 at max. That's what Seravalli is referring to. And ultimately, if you were to ask me that question and give you an answer straight up, I would say it's possible, but I don't know if it's really all too likely. Because here's the thing with Detroit: they're a team that's underperforming, yes, but the fact is, we know they are underperforming. Why do we know this? Well, it's because we know that a bunch of the guys on the team can play better than what they're showing off right now. Sorry, Patty Kane. Sorry, Vladimir Tarasenko. But these guys need to be a bit better. They can be a bit better. Sure, there are some guys that you can say have actually been living up to their potential, like Alex DeBrincat. I know a lot of people like to get on him, but he's leading the team in points, and he is on pace for a 70-something point year. Great. Lucas Raymond is on pace for however many gosh darn assists he's got. Dylan Larkin has been a goal-scoring machine. But there are a bunch of other forwards on the team that need to be pulling more weight. And once those guys do, obviously you hope that everybody pulls their weight at the same time. You would hate to see it if Vladimir Tarasenko starts to score, but Dylan Larkin's goal production at the same time takes a dip, or even worse, somebody gets injured or something like that. You would hate to see any situation like that manifest. But the Wings have a ceiling that I think is higher than what the Montreal Canadiens ceiling is right now. Now, is that going to continue into the next few years? Who really knows? Once Patty Kane, Tarasenko, and all these guys get older and their contracts start expiring, the question is, where do the Wings find themselves? And ultimately, I think at that point, it would be easier for Montreal to take over and kind of leapfrog Detroit in that respect, because Montreal, you can say they're in a more younger, youthfully exuberant spot compared to Detroit. The Canadiens have a bunch of young dudes that are going to try to become better because the best players on the Montreal Canadiens are all in that range. Caulfield, Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Doc, and then Demidov is going to come over soon. Newhook is a 2019 draftee as well. And then you even have some other younger dudes that are still kicking around and doing their thing, like Jake Evans and Raphael Harvey-Pinard, and Patrick Laine, I'd say, is a maybe not young guy per se, but he's young enough to not really toss him into the old category. Older dudes, you have Josh Anderson, you have Brendan Gallagher, and then on the D-core you have David Savard. Maybe Mike Matheson as well, you can toss his name into. But ultimately, the Canadiens, I'd say, they do have a better prospect pool, a better younger core of talent than Detroit does. I'm sorry, I'd rather take Demidov over Danielson. I'm sorry, I'd rather take Lane Hudson over Axel Sandin-Pellikka. I'm sorry, I'd rather... Oh, I don't know if I'd take Cayden over Edvinsson. That's a really tough one. Yeah, no, they're kind of comparable in my opinion. But younger dudes, I'd say Montreal has the edge. Younger guys that are already on the team, I'd say Montreal has a slight edge. Sure, Montreal is a little bit inferior to Detroit right now, but the difference isn't that massive, I think. I think the difference doesn't justify the amount of extra years that Detroit has given to older guys on the team, the Justin Halls, the formerly the Olimatas, the Jeff Petries, the Sherratts, the Canes, the Tarasenkos, everybody else there, Kopp and Comfer. There are so many older dudes, and I think Seravalli has a point here to talk about how, hey, the Sabres, Buffalo, they just all went in on younger dudes. Detroit went all in on older veteran dudes. Ottawa did something in the middle. But Detroit has had a pretty difficult time transitioning out of that rebuild phase that maybe Montreal has a chance to overtake them sometime soon. And I get it, you could say, wait a minute, Lego, the Montreal Canadiens, I mean, Detroit finished just a few points out of the playoffs last year, even you were making videos about that. And that's true. The Detroit Red Wings were 1 point away from making the final wildcard spot, but you have to recognize that even though that was the case, they still were not playing all too great. Towards the end of the year, they did get hot and they did win some games to try to make things interesting in the playoff bubble race, but I think a lot of that wildcard race was more so of a product of the teams in the Metro and Atlantic being terrible, rather than Detroit being good and forcing themselves into the playoff conversation. You have to also remember that the team was playing pretty much the best they could have played at that time, and they ended up barely missing out. Now, they're not playing anywhere near the best they could play, and they're struggling heavily in the standings as a result. Everybody's calling for Derek Lalonde's head, and the Red Wings are just kind of sitting there. I mean, they're tied right now in points with Montreal. However, they do have one fewer game played, so Montreal does not have the tiebreaker there. I'm not necessarily saying as well that Frank Seravalli is only referring to the idea of the standings or Montreal overtaking Detroit, but just kind of in the holistic view of team future and team projection, is there a chance that Montreal is in a better spot than Detroit sometime in the near future? I think that is what Seravalli is mostly referring to here, and I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, whether or not you think he is right or wrong. Do the Wings have the opportunity to get passed by Montreal in terms of this rebuild that everybody's talking about sometime within the reasonable next short-term future? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. 99 and bye.